George had always been fascinated by cars since his childhood. However, his real obsession began when he bought his first luxury car after a major business success. That car wasn't just a means of transportation to him. It became a symbol of status, power, and achievement. Every time he sat behind the wheel, he felt invincible, as if he had finally made it in life. The moment he drove his first luxury car, George was hooked. He felt a rush of adrenaline each time the engine roared. He started frequenting car shows and spending hours researching the latest models. Soon, his garage began filling up with the newest, most expensive cars. His obsession with owning the best cars in the market grew uncontrollably. Over time, George's love for cars turned into a compulsion. Every few months, he would buy a new model, each more extravagant than the last. His friends and family noticed the shift in his behavior, but he ignored their concerns. The thrill of purchasing and driving these machines consumed him. He began to see cars as an extension of himself and his success. He started traveling the world, attending exclusive car auctions, and purchasing limited edition models. His wealth allowed him to live a life of excess, but his obsession with cars started taking a toll on other aspects of his life. His focus shifted completely to his collection, and he began neglecting everything else. George wasn't just an ordinary car enthusiast. He was a self-made millionaire who had built an empire in the technology sector. With each business success, he celebrated by purchasing a new car. It became his ritual, a reward for his hard work and a symbol of his financial growth. His garage became his sanctuary, filled with sleek, state-of-the-art vehicles. His business ventures were booming, and his wealth seemed limitless. He spared no expense when it came to his car collection. He hired the best mechanics, built a custom garage, and surrounded himself with people who admired his wealth and passion for luxury cars. However, this wealth and success also blinded him to the real cost of his obsession. For George, cars weren't just transportation. They were symbols of his social status. He loved the attention and admiration he received whenever he drove his latest model. People would gather around asking questions, and George reveled in their awe. To him, each car represented a new level of achievement, a testament to his success. His luxury cars were more than just possessions, they were a part of his identity. He was known for his impeccable taste and extravagant lifestyle. Yet beneath the surface, his obsession with cars was slowly eroding his relationships and sense of fulfillment. As the years passed, George's obsession with cars only grew stronger. No matter how many vehicles he purchased, it was never enough. He began following every car launch religiously, always aiming to be the first to own the latest models. His desire for more never seemed to fade, and he constantly sought out ways to outdo himself. This obsession turned into an addiction. George spent sleepless nights browsing car forums, contacting dealers, and planning his next purchase. His mind was consumed with thoughts of speed, luxury, and exclusivity. He believed that each new car would bring him closer to ultimate happiness, but the satisfaction was always fleeting. While George's car collection grew, other areas of his life began to suffer. His business, once his top priority, started to take a back seat. He stopped attending important meetings and relied on his team to manage the day-to-day operations. His relationships with friends and family also deteriorated as his world revolved solely around cars. His personal life became increasingly isolated. Social events, family gatherings, and even vacations were neglected in favor of spending time with his beloved cars. George was caught in a never-ending cycle, always chasing the next thrill, but never finding true contentment. As George's obsession with cars grew, his relationships with family and friends began to deteriorate significantly. He spent most of his time researching new cars and test driving them, to the point where his luxurious garage became his entire world. He neglected family gatherings and social events, rarely participating or visiting loved ones. His old friends felt they no longer knew him. His priorities had completely shifted. Once, his old friends invited him on a road trip, but he declined, saying he wanted to stay home and test his new car. In reality, he had lost the desire to spend time with others as he once did, and cars became his only focus. George didn't realize that his obsession was costing him a lot on a personal and emotional level, but he chose to ignore all the signs. As time passed, George began to feel isolated. even though he was living a life filled with luxury and extravagance. Fancy cars and new models couldn't fill the void of missing real relationships in his life. His romantic relationships also deteriorated as his partner felt that he cared more about his cars than about her. She repeatedly tried to point out that money and cars couldn't substitute for love and connection. But George would always reply that he worked hard only to provide them with a good life. In the end, she left him, and he was left alone in his world of cars. He realized then that his obsession had caused him to lose the most important people in his life, but he couldn't change himself. He was addicted to cars, and everything in his life revolved around them. George's obsession with luxury cars wasn't limited to owning them. He also had a deep love for speed and the thrill that came with driving fast. Every time he bought a new car, he was eager to test its limits on the highways, pushing the gas pedal as hard as possible. He felt that driving at high speeds gave him a sense of power and control, as if the world was at his fingertips, and he didn't care about laws or consequences. Every time he drove recklessly, he felt like he was challenging himself, always looking for new boundaries to push. The luxury cars gave him a false sense of security because of their advanced safety features, which only encouraged him to drive faster and more dangerously. As George pushed the boundaries of speed and danger, his driving became more reckless. He started seeking out roads and highways where he could drive at breakneck speeds without being noticed by the authorities. Despite several close calls, he never thought about the potential risks involved. Instead, he saw each near miss as a victory, proof that he could outsmart fate. His friends and family constantly warned him about his behavior, but he ignored their concerns. To him, speed was a thrill, an addiction he couldn't give up. He believed that his wealth and expensive cars made him invincible, unaware of the dark road that lay ahead. Despite his vast wealth, George's extravagant lifestyle began to put a strain on his finances. Maintaining a collection of high-end cars was no small feat. The cost of insurance, maintenance, storage, and customization quickly added up. But George refused to cut back on his spending. He saw his cars as a reflection of his success, and cutting back would mean admitting defeat. As his financial obligations grew, George started dipping into savings meant for other purposes. He sold off properties and even took out loans to keep up with his luxurious lifestyle. His obsession with cars was becoming unsustainable, but he was too deep into it to stop. The financial strain wasn't the only cost. George's obsession began to take a severe emotional toll on him. Despite being surrounded by luxury, he started feeling increasingly empty. The cars that once brought him so much joy no longer had the same effect. His constant pursuit of the latest model left him feeling unfulfilled, and his lavish lifestyle only masked a deeper loneliness. He began to realize that no matter how many cars he owned or how fast he drove, he couldn't escape the growing void inside him. But instead of seeking help, George doubled down on his obsession, hoping that one more car, one more thrill, would finally bring him the happiness he craved. George couldn't resist the temptation of new car models. Every time a luxury car company released a new model, he felt an overwhelming urge to be the first to own it. It wasn't just about buying a new car. He felt each vehicle represented a new level of success and distinction. He frequently attended global car shows and spent large sums just to be the first to acquire the best and latest cars. On one occasion, George paid an enormous amount for a special edition sports car that was part of a limited production run. To him, this car was proof of his status among car enthusiasts and luxury lovers. He wasn't thinking about the financial or practical implications. He was living in a world of absolute indulgence, where money wasn't a barrier to his ever-growing passion. George's relentless pursuit of the latest and greatest cars began to catch up with him. His friends and family watched in disbelief as he continued to spend vast amounts of money on vehicles he barely had time to drive. His garage was overflowing with cars, many of which he hadn't touched in months. Yet every time a new model was announced, he couldn't resist the urge to add it to his collection. The emotional and financial toll of this indulgence became more apparent. George was no longer buying cars out of passion or excitement. It had become a compulsion. The joy he once felt was gone, replaced by a sense of obligation to maintain his image and status. Even though he was surrounded by luxury, he felt increasingly trapped by his own choices. As George continued to live his extravagant lifestyle, the strain began to show. His health started to deteriorate due to the constant stress of maintaining his empire and keeping up with his lavish expenditures. His once strong physique weakened, and sleepless nights spent worrying about his finances took a toll on his mental well-being. The thrill of buying new cars no longer excited him the way it once did. Instead, he felt a growing sense of emptiness. The responsibilities of managing his assets and ensuring the upkeep of his car collection became burdensome. George had once felt powerful and in control, but now he felt drained, unable to keep up with the demands of his high-flying lifestyle. With his health in decline and his enthusiasm for cars waning, George began to question the meaning of it all. Why was he still chasing after the latest cars when they no longer brought him happiness? He realized that his obsession had consumed him, leaving little room for personal fulfillment or meaningful relationships. He spent more time reflecting on his choices and wondering if he could ever find a way out of the cycle he had created. Yet, despite these doubts, George found it difficult to break free from the habits that had defined his life for so long. The lure of luxury and speed still held a powerful grip on him, even as he questioned whether it was worth the cost. One day, George heard about a new hypercar that was set to redefine the world of luxury vehicles. It was faster, sleeker, and more exclusive than anything else on the market. Despite his growing doubts about his lifestyle, George couldn't resist the temptation. He convinced himself that this car would be his final purchase, the ultimate addition to his collection. He spent a fortune acquiring the car, and as he took delivery of the sleek machine, he felt a rush of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. For a moment, it seemed like the old thrill was back. George planned to take it for a drive and push its limits, just like he had with all his previous cars. Little did he know, this decision would lead to tragic consequences. On the night George decided to test his new hypercar, he took it to a remote highway, free from traffic and speed limits. The powerful engine roared to life, and George felt the familiar adrenaline rush as he accelerated to dangerous speeds. But this time, something was different. The car's immense power, combined with George's reckless driving, pushed both man and machine to the edge. As he took a sharp turn at high speed, George lost control of the car. It veered off the road and slammed into a barrier. The impact was catastrophic, and despite the car's advanced safety features, George didn't survive the crash. His life, once defined by luxury and excess, came to a sudden, violent end. In the days following George's death, the news of the accident spread quickly. His friends and family were devastated, though many had long feared that his obsession with speed would lead to such a tragic outcome. His extensive car collection, once a source of pride, now felt like a hollow reminder of a life consumed by excess. George had spent his life chasing after material wealth and status, but in the end it brought him little lasting joy. His garage, filled with the finest cars in the world, stood as a monument to his success and his downfall. People who once admired his lifestyle now spoke of the dangers of excess and the fleeting nature of material pursuits. George's life became a cautionary tale for those who knew him. His relentless pursuit of luxury and speed, while glamorous on the surface, ultimately led to his isolation and untimely death. Those who had once envied his wealth and success now saw the cost of his obsession. His story served as a reminder that true happiness doesn't come from material possessions or status symbols. In the end, George had everything he thought he wanted, but he lost the things that truly mattered: his relationships, his health, and ultimately his life.